She stood in the middle of the road like a discount Gandalf, arms crossed, oversized sunglasses glinting in the sun, and one foot planted squarely in front of my moving truck. I wasn't speeding. I wasn't blasting music. I was just trying to back my U-Haul into my own damn driveway. But Karen, yes, her name was actually Karen, decided today was the day she was going to guard the sanctity of suburban peace like some overzealous parking lot paladin. "You can't park that monstrosity here," she barked, practically foaming at the mouth. "It's blocking the view from my kitchen window." Her kitchen window was a good 50 feet away and partially obscured by a row of hedges, but logic had long since packed its bags and moved out of this neighborhood. I had lived in the house for exactly 7 minutes. Still wearing the sweat-drenched t-shirt from the cross-country drive, I leaned out the window and gave her my best customer service smile. The kind that says, "I'm not the one, lady. I'm just unloading," I said. "Takes 30 minutes top. You'll survive." She didn't flinch. In fact, she took a step closer to my bumper and folded her arms tighter. Somewhere behind her, a perfectly waxed Lexus glistened in her driveway, practically purring with passive aggression. A beige monolith of status, parked diagonally like it owned the cul-de-sac. I could already tell Karen wasn't a casual HOA enforcer. No, she was the final boss of neighborhood busybodies. The kind who had laminated copies of the bylaws, probably color-coded by violation type. And I, apparently, was in direct violation of her peace and quiet. "You need to move this truck immediately," she snapped. "The HOA requires notice for commercial vehicles." I didn't have the energy to explain that a U-Haul wasn't a commercial vehicle and that even if it were, I had 3 legally allotted days for unloading. I just wanted to get my couch inside before I melted into the pavement. But Karen had other plans. When I tried inching backward again, she slammed her hand onto the hood of the truck with the full theatrical force of someone who once led a PDA protest over artificial turf. "I'm calling the HOA president," she threatened. I resisted the urge to tell her she was speaking to him, because, technically, she was. I hadn't told anyone yet, but I'd quietly bought into the board the month before I moved in, when the previous president resigned mid-scandal involving a misallocated holiday light fund. But revealing that now would ruin the fun. I wanted to see how far she'd go before burying her in her own stupidity. Eventually, she waddled back to her Lexus, shrieking into her phone loud enough for me to hear every syllable. "Yes, it's a Code 5, oversized vehicle, potential obstruction, possibly unregistered," she declared, like she was reporting a drug bust instead of a moving day. I shook my head, climbed out, and started unloading boxes by hand while she kept talking and pointing. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains. One guy down the block even grabbed popcorn, literally. But I kept my cool. You have to, when you're about to legally obliterate someone. 10 minutes later, a tow truck arrived. I kid you not. Karen had speed-dialed the local towing service and convinced them she was acting under official HOA authority. The driver, a sleepy-looking guy with a clipboard and zero interest in justice, began inspecting my U-Haul like he was about to impound it. That's when I stepped in. Calmly, politely, I handed him a laminated sheet of paper. Yes, I had my own, stating my temporary vehicle permit, signed off by the HOA board, including my own signature in neat blue ink. The driver blinked, mumbled an apology, and slunk back to his truck. "Karen?" She turned purple. "You forged that," she hissed. "You can't just write your own permits." I smiled. "Actually, Karen, I can. I'm the new HOA president." Surprise. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, flapping like a fish on land. Her phone slipped from her hand and hit the pavement. A small crowd had gathered by then, neighbors who'd clearly been waiting for the day someone stood up to the neighborhood dragon. One even clap. Karen didn't know where to look. Then came the twist she didn't expect. I motioned to the tow truck driver, who was about to pull away. "Actually, since you're here," I said, There's a vehicle illegally parked at an angle that obstructs the sidewalk and creates a hazard for strollers and wheelchairs. Right there. I pointed at Karen's Lexus. The driver paused. Karen screamed. I grinned. She's been warned. Multiple complaints. Documented. It was technically true. I had been forwarded complaints during the board transition. 3 neighbors had flagged her for sidewalk blocking before I even moved in. Karen threw a fit that could have registered on the Richter scale. She waved her arms, stomped her foot, shouted about legal action, and even tried to physically block the tow truck with her body until she realized she couldn't win both battles at once. But the driver, emboldened by my paperwork and the growing audience, just shrugged and hooked up the Lexus like it was a common junker. It was glorious. As the car was lifted into the air, her expression shifted from fury to confusion to a kind of raw existential disbelief. I half expected her to start bargaining with the heavens. She looked at me like I had personally rewritten the laws of reality. "You don't belong here," she whispered, as if invoking some ancient suburban curse. I shrugged. "Maybe not. But I do own the bylaws." Then I turned and carried another box inside. By the time the tow truck disappeared down the street, Karen was pacing her lawn, muttering about lawsuits and conspiracies, her voice growing hoarser with each loop. The neighbors went back inside, a little more hopeful about the future. I finally parked the U-Haul in peace, unloaded the rest of my stuff, and cracked open a beer on the porch. It tasted like justice, but the best part? This wasn't over. Not even close. Karen had made it her mission to make me miserable. She just didn't realize I'd already made it mine to dismantle her entire paper crown empire. One smug Lexus at a time. Karen didn't waste a single hour before declaring war. By sunrise the next morning, I'd been issued my first HOA violation, hand-delivered, no less. A bright yellow slip taped to my front door like it was a parking ticket of shame. Violation: improper trash bin placement. I hadn't even unpacked my silverware, and already I was on her radar for apparently committing unspeakable acts of garbage etiquette. The bins were 3 inches past the curb line. Gasp. I stared at the notice for a full 30 seconds before bursting out laughing. 3 inches. She'd measured. I could picture her crouched at dawn with a tape measure and a headlamp, silently cackling to herself. It would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. Still, I knew what this was. A test. Karen was trying to see if I'd cave, back down, bend to the HOA hierarchy like so many before me. What she didn't realize was that I'd spent 10 years managing operations for a logistics firm, which meant I specialized in bureaucracy and could navigate paperwork like a lawyer on caffeine and spite. You don't outpetty a guy who once reorganized a $30 million supply chain out of sheer boredom. So I got to work. First, I reviewed the trash policy. Turns out, the rule required bins to be placed no more than 12 inches from the curb. Mine were at 15. Karen had technically caught something, but just barely. So I submitted an official compliance form, moved the bins 3 inches, and made sure to include a time-stamped photo in my reply. That should have ended it. But no. Karen escalated. 2 days later, another violation: unapproved lawn ornaments. I had a single ceramic gnome. Just one. His name was Ron. He wasn't even facing the street. Somehow, he offended her HOA sensibilities so much she filed a complaint through the internal system, flagged it urgent, and left a printout in my mailbox. The gall. I didn't even bother hiding my smirk. Instead, I moved Ron the gnome 1 inch every day, closer and closer to her property line. By the end of the week, he was perched on my mailbox like a defiant war general, saluting her house. That's when the emails started. Karen must have found my name in the board registry because I began receiving long bullet-pointed screeds about community values, property integrity, and a worrying trend of defiance. She copied other board members too, probably expecting them to rally to her defense. Instead, I replied to each message with a courteous thank you and attached a revised agenda for our next HOA meeting with trash policy clarity, and lawn ornament tolerance guidelines, added as new discussion items. That was my first real strike. The second came at the HOA meeting itself. I expected a quiet affair, 10 people tops, maybe some iced tea and light bickering over tree trimming. Instead, it was standing room only. Karen had summoned her inner cult leader and mobilized what I now call the Lavender Brigade, a group of middle-aged women in pastel cardigans and orthopedic sandals, clutching laminated bylaws like they were ancient scrolls. They sat in a tight semicircle near the front, arms folded, eyes sharp. Karen stood beside them, grinning like a televangelist about to raise funds for a gold-plated mailbox. She opened with a monologue. "There has been a concerning rise in noncompliance," she said, glancing directly at me, "and as long-standing members of this community, we must protect its dignity." Her voice had that syrupy tone, sweet on the surface, acidic underneath. Certain individuals seem to believe the rules don't apply to them. I nodded along like a polite audience member at a Broadway flop. When she finished, I waited a beat, then cleared my throat. "Thank you, Karen," I said. "And thank you for bringing up the dignity of the community. In fact, I'd like to propose we enhance our dignity with clearer, more practical enforcement processes." I clicked a button on my remote and lit up a projector screen behind me. On it was a color-coded spreadsheet of all HOA violations issued in the past 2 years. It was brutal. Karen accounted for 63% of them. I had charts. I had graphs. I even had a pie chart where her name literally filled more than half the circle. The room went silent. Then came the laughter, quiet at first, then louder. One of the Lavender Brigade muttered, "I knew it." Karen was visibly sweating. "This is a distortion," she snapped. "Those violations were necessary. Standards have to be maintained." I calmly switched slides. "Here's a list of properties with no complaints at all, followed by photos of their yards. Immaculate. Yet no citations. Meanwhile, here's Karen's own lawn last fall, untrimmed hedges, expired Halloween decor, and what appears to be a raccoon rummaging through an open compost bin." I paused. I checked. No violation was ever issued. The silence turned icy. Karen opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her facade cracked just a little. "This is a personal attack," she whispered. I shook my head. "No, Karen. It's an accountability review." That line hit hard. Several board members nodded. One even clapped again. Same guy from the popcorn incident. Legend. But what really twisted the knife was my closing remark. "As HOA president, I'm instituting a probation system. Anyone found to be issuing citations without merit or using the HOA system for personal vendettas will be subject to review." I didn't say her name. I didn't need to. Everyone knew. Karen stormed out without a word, her army of cardigan loyalists trailing awkwardly behind like kids who just realized their coach cheated. I thought that would cool things down. Maybe give her space to recalibrate, reflect, maybe even retreat. But Karen didn't back down. She doubled down. That weekend, she installed a brand new security camera pointing directly at my driveway. It was mounted crookedly on her porch gutter, like a surveillance hawk with a vendetta. A blinking red light pulsed at night like some weird suburban death laser. I wasn't worried. I just waved at it each morning while sipping coffee in my robe. But then she crossed the line. Monday morning, I found my tires slashed. All 4 of them. Clean cuts, shallow enough to deflate but not destroy, professional work. No note, no witnesses, no evidence, except for one. Karen's security camera, positioned directly across the street. The same camera she'd installed to monitor my property. And here's the kicker, she'd even posted a yard sign beneath it, 24/7 monitoring for safety. Beautiful. I didn't call the police. I called my lawyer. Because what Karen didn't know, couldn't have known, is that I'd had a minor break-in scare at my old place 2 months ago. Ever since then, I'd started running a personal Nest cam in my truck's dash. It wasn't obvious. It blended right in. but it had a clear angle of my entire front yard, including the shadowy figure crouching beside my tires at 3:14 a.m. I couldn't see her face, but the outline was unmistakable. The hoodie, the slippers, the wild puff of hair frizzing out in the breeze. And more importantly, the footage synced perfectly with the red blink of her porch camera turning off just before the sabotage. What kind of idiot disables their own surveillance the second they commit a crime? Karen-level idiot, that's who. So now I had video. I had motive. I had opportunity. And I had patience, because instead of calling the police or confronting her directly, I chose a different route. I submitted the footage to the HOA Ethics Committee, not just as a vandalism report, but as a formal motion to suspend Karen's board privileges and recommend legal action. The fallout would be nuclear, but I hadn't even played my final card yet. That came next, and when it landed, it would blow the hinges off her kingdom of HOA terror. The Ethics Committee moved faster than I expected, probably because every member had their own Karen scar story buried under forced smiles and passive-aggressive potluck invitations. Within 48 hours, I received a formal acknowledgement letter confirming the launch of an internal investigation into alleged acts of sabotage, misuse of authority, and gross violation of community trust. I forwarded it to Karen anonymously. No subject line, no message body. Just a clean PDF with her name on the top and the words, "Pending disciplinary review," in bold. I imagine she saw it sometime around breakfast, probably while spooning half-skim yogurt into her mouth and glaring at birds for being too loud. Either way, the reaction was instant. That same afternoon, I saw her standing in her yard, pacing like a general reviewing invisible troops. Gone were the passive-aggressive cardigans and matching visors. Karen had entered her final form. Black tracksuit, hair in a tight bun, clipboard in hand, and phone practically glued to her cheek. She was barking into it with increasing volume, clearly rallying support for what I now considered her personal HOA Alamo. The more pressure I applied, the more cracks appeared. Her perfect neighborhood queen persona was buckling under the weight of actual accountability. But just when I thought she'd fold, she threw a Hail Mary. 3 days later, she hosted what she called a neighborhood emergency council. It wasn't official. It wasn't even allowed. But she printed flyers anyway and stuffed them in every mailbox like it was a block party instead of a power grab. Concerned citizens meet up, the flyer said. Topic: misconduct at the highest level of HOA leadership. I was both insulted and impressed. Karen had weaponized Canva and Office Depot in less than 24 hours. I went, of course, dressed neatly, clipboard of my own, fully expecting the circus. What I walked into was, well, worse. Picture 30 folding chairs on her front lawn, all facing a makeshift podium made from stacked milk crates and a borrowed mic stand. A jug of iced tea and a suspiciously dry plate of cookies sat untouched on a patio table. Karen stood at the center, voice amplified and expression tragic, like a suburban Shakespearean lead. This neighborhood, she intoned, is under siege. What we are witnessing is not leadership. It is tyranny cloaked in technicalities. She pointed vaguely in my direction, but didn't say my name. I smiled and waved. A few people chuckled. Karen powered on. Under this so-called president, we've seen negligence, retaliation, and now, false accusations. That last bit hung in the air, baiting me to rise. But I didn't. I let her talk, let her make her case to the crowd she assumed adored her. What she didn't realize was that most of them had only shown up for the drama. A free live show beats watching reruns. Then she made a fatal mistake. She passed around a petition. To recall our current HOA president, she declared. Effective immediately. And that's when I rose. Just a moment, I said, walking calmly toward the podium. Before you sign anything, you might want to hear the facts. I pulled a stack of printed stills from the security footage out of my folder and held them up for the group. Frame by frame, they showed a shadowy figure near my truck's tires, the porch camera blinking off, and a blurry yet unmistakable outline that matched Karen's every feature. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Karen tried to speak. I cut her off. I didn't come here to defend myself, I said. I came to warn you. I held up the HOA bylaws. Forgery of citations, harassment, and property vandalism, all grounds not just for removal from the board, but for criminal investigation. And this, I tapped the stills, is just the beginning. Karen's jaw tightened. This is a smear campaign, she snapped. He doctored those. This is fake. Oh? Then you won't mind if we play the full video. I turned to my laptop, connected to a portable speaker, and let the footage roll. Gasps rippled across the yard. She was caught red-handed or red-slippered in her case. The stammering began almost immediately. It was dark. I thought I saw a stray animal. I was checking for a raccoon. Karen, I said, voice low but steady, you slashed all 4 tires and shut off your own security feed. Your defense is raccoon. A neighbor in the back coughed loudly, suspiciously close to a laugh. Before she could spin another tale, I struck the final blow. Also, I said, flipping to the last page in my folder, in case you're wondering, the board received your petition. And we ran the names. 7 of the signatures are fake, including 2 residents who passed away last year. So now we're looking at fraud too. Boom. Karen froze. Her mouth opened, then shut. Twice. Someone whispered, she forged signatures? Another said, she used poor Martha's name? Oh my God. The crowd that had been hers began to pivot. Neighbors who once feared her wrath now saw weakness, and worse, desperation. She tried to regain footing. This is all a lie, she screamed. He's twisting everything. He's trying to destroy me. I nodded slowly. No, Karen. You're destroying yourself. I'm just documenting the process. The meeting unraveled. People began leaving, some quietly, some muttering angry remarks. A few shook my hand on their way out. The Lavender Brigade didn't even look back. Karen was left standing alone in front of her milk crate podium, the sun catching her expression just enough to show the panic beneath the fury. That evening, as I sipped a beer on my porch and watched the neighborhood settle down, I received a message from one of the board members. Unanimous vote, it read. Karen suspended pending investigation. We'll call for a special session next week to make it permanent. I didn't reply. I just looked across the street at her now eerily dark house. No porch light. No blinking camera. Just silence. The empire was crumbling. But the weirdest part? I didn't feel victorious. I felt unfinished. Because if I'd learned anything from my short but eventful tenure in HOA warfare, it was this. Karen never retreats. She recalibrates. And sure enough, the next morning, her Lexus returned. Not the same one that got towed. A newer model. Freshly waxed. Parked, again, halfway across the sidewalk. It wasn't just a flex. It was a message. She was back. And whatever she was planning next, it was going to be big. And this time, I wasn't just playing defense. 2 days of eerie quiet passed. Karen's house remained still, blinds drawn, front yard untouched, Lexus perfectly parked like a trophy kill. But I could feel it, she was regrouping. Her silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. And I knew the storm would break any moment. I just didn't expect it to involve city code enforcement, 3 squad cars, and a staged neighborhood inspection, complete with bogus fines and one very smug former HOA queen standing across the street sipping sparkling water like she was watching Wimbledon. It started on a Wednesday morning, just as I was preparing to leave for work. A white van with the city's logo pulled up in front of my house, followed by 2 patrol vehicles. 4 uniformed officials stepped out with clipboards and tape measures. No knock, no doorbell. Just immediate pacing, photographing, and murmuring. I stepped outside, holding my coffee, and asked if they needed something. The lead inspector, a wiry guy with a receding hairline and a voice like a fax machine, barely looked up. Anonymous complaint, he said. Property misuse. Potential code violations. Anonymous, sure. I didn't need Google Maps to locate the source. Karen was watching from behind her blinds, not even pretending to hide. I walked calmly down my front steps and smiled. Would you like to see my permits now or after the charade? The inspector blinked, clearly not used to sarcasm before 9 a.m. We've had several concerns filed about recent structural changes, he continued. Unpermitted additions, improper storm drainage, yard obstruction. I stared at him for a long moment. Then I pointed to my yard. That, I said, gesturing to a garden hose coiled neatly by my garage. That's the obstruction? And the addition is a power-washed patio slab that's been here since 1997. Would you like the satellite photos? Because I have them. To their credit, the officers started to look uncomfortable. One even asked, "You have all your paperwork on file?" I walked to my front door, came back out with a thick binder, and dropped it on the hood of my car. It made a satisfying thump. Every permit, survey, and code certificate since I bought the house, I said. And I'd be happy to show you the HOA minutes approving every improvement, if you'd like a reading list. The lead inspector clearly wanted to salvage what was left of his imaginary case. Well, we still need to document the concerns. Standard procedure. I nodded. Of course. Just be aware that filing false reports is a criminal offense, and I'll be requesting the original complaint under the state transparency laws. So whoever filed this might want to review the penalties for perjury. The officers exchanged glances. One muttered something into his radio. Within 20 minutes, the inspection was over. They left without issuing a single citation. No warnings. No follow-ups. Just tired eyes and weak apologies. And the best part? Karen had come outside halfway through, pretending to sweep her already spotless porch. She was close enough to overhear every word. Her face when the officers left empty-handed? Worth framing. Still, her move was bold. She'd reached beyond the HOA. She was going outside the system now, trying to use city infrastructure like it was just another chapter in her suburban playbook. And that meant one thing: I had to escalate too. That night, I called a friend, Angela, a local journalist with a mean streak for corruption and a knack for finding the ugliest dirt in the cleanest neighborhood. I gave her everything. The fake citations, the doctored petition, the security footage, the retaliatory inspection. Her eyes lit up over coffee. You realize, she said, flipping through the folder, this is enough to bury her political ambitions. Political? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Angela nodded, pulling up a page on her phone. Karen's running for a city council seat. Open position next year. Already started fundraising and building a platform, protecting traditional neighborhood values. Sound familiar? It hit me like a freight train full of beige minivans. This wasn't just about power in the HOA. This was a warm-up. Karen was rehearsing. Our little war was just a proving ground for something bigger. And if she could bulldoze me, bury a few violations, and emerge looking like the upstanding citizen who cleaned up the neighborhood, she'd use it as a launchpad for the next phase of her reign. I leaned back in my chair and took a long sip of bitter, glorious coffee. Then let's give the voters a preview, I said. Angela's article dropped 3 days later. Headline: Power, Petty Politics, and the HOA Queen, How One Neighborhood Survived the Reign of Karen W. The piece was brutal. It quoted bylaws, showed screen grabs of the surveillance footage, included interviews with residents who'd received citations for things like fence paint being too glossy. One former board member admitted Karen once tried to fine a family for wind chime volume. The story painted a clear picture. A woman drunk on control, willing to weaponize policy, police, and public trust to maintain a fantasy of suburban supremacy. The story hit local news within hours. The city's website crashed under requests to revoke her inspection complaint. Karen's social media, previously full of inspirational quotes and passive-aggressive baking photos, went silent. Then came the final twist. The next HOA board meeting. Packed house. Standing room only. Karen showed up late, hoping for a seat at the table. But I'd already rearranged the seating chart. Her nameplate was gone. A new one stood in its place. Interim board liaison, pending ethics resolution. She stood in the doorway, blinking like she'd walked into her own funeral. I rose. Before we begin, I said to the crowd, I'd like to address the matter of recent press attention. Murmurs rippled. Karen shrank slightly. While the HOA does not take official positions on media coverage, I continued, we do stand for transparency. And in that spirit, I move that we make the following changes to board policy. One by one, I rolled them out. All complaints must be signed and publicly logged. No anonymous sabotage. No board member can file or process a complaint without oversight. Any attempt to weaponize city services for personal feuds would result in immediate expulsion. Each point was met with nods, murmurs of approval, and one or two whispered, finally is. Karen tried to interrupt, twice, but I cut her off with procedure. Please, Ms. W. We'll allow public comment at the end. She sat in the back, alone. When her turn came, she stood but didn't speak. She just stared, eyes glassy, jaw clenched. Then she walked out. Quiet. No dramatic exit. No screams. Just footsteps on tile and the soft click of the door closing. But I didn't celebrate, because I knew she wasn't gone. The next day, I got a call from the city clerk's office. Karen had officially submitted her candidacy for city council. War, it seemed, was just beginning. But this time, the battlefield wasn't just one cul-de-sac. It was the entire town. Karen's campaign signs started appearing before I'd even finished my morning coffee. Glossy, pastel-colored monstrosities with her name in elegant serif font. Karen Whitmore, preserving neighborhood values. Each one planted strategically across the district, near dog parks, schools, HOA entry gate. Always angled for maximum visibility, always smiling that same forced, frozen smile. Her slogans read like threats in cursive. Decency starts at home, respect the rules, because clean streets deserve clean leadership. I nearly choked on my toast. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was doubling down. And judging by the number of signs, she had money behind her. Either that, or she'd raided the HOA emergency fund again. I wouldn't put it past her. I wasn't running for office. I had no plans to. But I wasn't about to let her climb out of the HOA wreckage she caused and waltz into city politics with her passive-aggressive smile and clipboard of doom. No. She wanted a bigger arena? Fine. I'd give her a bigger audience. Because Karen didn't realize something crucial. She thought the game was about power. It wasn't. It was about accountability. And I had receipts. I spent the next week quietly collecting statements. Not slander, not rumors, facts. Paper trails. Copies of emails she'd sent threatening residents with made-up citations. Voicemails left on neighbors' machines telling them to watch where they park or think twice about those wind chimes. I compiled every misuse of power, every manipulated inspection, every petty vendetta she'd buried under community decorum. Then I got help from Angela again, only this time we weren't writing an article. We were producing a documentary. It was called The Karen Doctrine, When HOA Becomes a Weapon. 27 minutes long, packed with interviews, footage, dramatized recreations, and a narrator who sounded like he'd just finished a series on political corruption in Eastern Europe. It was equal parts gripping, damning, and hilarious. Especially the part where a reenactor dressed as Karen used a leaf blower to terrorize a kid's lemonade stand because the table legs weren't regulation height. The best part? It wasn't satire. That actually happened. We didn't post it on YouTube or bury it on some obscure Vimeo link. We went local. Really local. Angela had a contact at the town's community access TV station. The one that played high school football games and city council meetings. The documentary aired twice a night for a full week in the primetime slot right after dinner, sandwiched between gardening tips and the mayor's public announcements. Then we uploaded it to every local Facebook group. The retired folks ate it up. The PTA moms passed it around like PTA-approved popcorn. It exploded. And Karen? Oh, Karen went ballistic. She held a press conference on the steps of City Hall the next morning. Dressed in a lavender power suit, flanked by a single intern holding a clipboard and a guy who looked like he regretted showing up, she stood before a handful of reporters and declared it was all a smear campaign. "This is a calculated attempt to destroy my character," she insisted. "These videos are edited, these stories exaggerated, and this so-called documentary is nothing more than a coordinated attack from a disgruntled resident with a grudge." I watched from my porch, sipping coffee and laughing so hard I almost dropped my mug. Because behind her, someone had stuck one of her own signs in a flower pot, and written, "Karen, stop tattling," across it in permanent marker. The real blow came that evening. The city clerk's office issued a statement verifying that 3 of Karen's financial disclosures were incomplete. Her campaign treasurer had resigned. 2 of her top donors pulled out. Then it got worse. Angela broke the news that Karen had listed HOA Community Outreach expenses on her personal taxes as political consulting. That, apparently, was a federal no-no. Karen's campaign began to crumble. But still, she refused to concede. She canvassed harder, knocked on doors, tried to reframe herself as a victim of online harassment. "All I ever wanted was peace in our neighborhoods," she said in a video that would have sounded more believable if she hadn't filmed it from the passenger seat of her Lexus, parked, once again, halfway across her sidewalk. But voters weren't buying it. Election day came. I didn't run, but I volunteered at a polling station. Karen came in mid-morning wearing a sash that read "Candidate," like she was in a suburban beauty pageant. I nodded politely. She scowled, said nothing. As she left, I overheard her mutter to someone, "This town deserves better." I agreed. That night, the results came in. Karen didn't just lose, she was annihilated. 3rd place out of 4, with barely 9% of the vote. The winner was a former school principal who ran on a platform of actual infrastructure reform. When the results were posted online, someone edited the Wikipedia entry for Karen's neighborhood to say, "Former tyrant in residence." It was taken down within an hour. I saved a screenshot. The aftermath was oddly quiet. Karen vanished from public view. Her Lexus didn't move for days. Her house went dark. For a moment, I almost felt bad. Almost. Until I got a call from Angela. "You need to see this," she said. Apparently, Karen had submitted a last-ditch complaint to the city zoning board. She claimed I had violated setback laws by building a shed too close to the fence. Problem was, I didn't own a shed. Never had. She included photos in her complaint, except they weren't mine. She'd taken pictures of a shed 2 streets over and claimed it was on my property. The board dismissed it in under 20 minutes. But now, her file was flagged. She was officially labeled a frequent false claimant, meaning any future complaints from her required review before action. Karen had filed her last fake report. The system was done with her. The neighborhood? Well, it began to change. The next HOA election brought in new faces, reasonable people with jobs and hobbies that didn't involve stalking shrubbery. The citations stopped. The paranoia lifted. People started chatting again on sidewalks, hosting yard sales, even setting up a community movie night on the Greenbelt. Someone, no one claimed credit, left a garden gnome on Karen's porch, holding a scroll that read "Retired." It disappeared within the hour. As for me, I stayed right where I was. Same house, same porch. But now, no more yellow violation slip. No more bogus inspections. No more clipboard crusaders pacing the block like suburban mall cop. Just peace. And the occasional neighbor dropping by to say, "Thank you." Karen eventually sold the house. Quietly. No yard signs. Just one moving truck in the dead of night and a bitter Yelp review of the neighborhood that claimed she'd been sabotaged by deeply entrenched corruption. Her review had 1 star. Someone replied, "Thanks for the entertainment. Don't come back. I still have Ron the gnome. He lives on my mailbox now, still saluting the street. And every time I look at him, I remember one simple truth. You can fight a Karen with reason, or rules, or paperwork, but nothing, absolutely nothing, beats fighting her with her own tactics and winning with a grin,